Welcome to this week's Today's Health and Wellness Podcast. This is Brett. The Today's Health and Wellness Podcast is a joint effort of the Central Ohio Health and Wellness Magazine and Today's Health. In each week's podcast, we spotlight health and wellness stories you'll find in the magazine, on Today's Health web pages, on our social media, as well as extras you'll only hear in the weekly podcasts. Thanks for subscribing and hitting the play button. Let's get started right after this. I'm here with Aaron Greene with College Liftoff and wanted to talk about the stresses of walking into college decisions. And that's what College Liftoff is really all about, is to help you get from point A to point B, finding the right college for your student, and finding the right education path. But I want to let Aaron Greene, the founder of College Liftoff, talk a little bit more about what College Liftoff is.
Yeah, so thanks, Brett. We talk about before I get into the stresses, College Liftoff, what we do is we work with families on getting ready to go off to college, academically, financially. We like to look at college as what it is today. It's an investment. It's a huge one. In fact, our motto is name something you spend $80,000 to $200,000 on and we don't consult professionals. Here is higher education. This is what college has literally become. It's a lot like buying a house, actually. When you buy a house, you're buying two things. You buy a property and you buy a mortgage. College is actually built the exact same way. You buy into the academics of a school, and then you buy into the financial aid package that goes along with it. You put it together to get the best value for education. So as an easy example, you wouldn't spend $270,000 on a house that's appraised $120,000. So you don't want to spend $90,000 on an education that only yields $30,000 a year. That doesn't make any sense. So we want to reverse that. We want to see how do we actually get and it can account for tangible educational value in this day and age when it costs the equivalent of a house to send a kid to school. So talking a little bit about the stressors of what this is doing for you guys, the parents out there. Let's throw it all on the table because we talk about this a lot and what are the things that are really stressing out parents in this day and age. One is the time that it takes to really go through this and the time it takes to be able to sift through and find the right schools for your students. But really, the time is really leading to the difference in the system. And what I mean by that is this is a different decision-making process that you went through when you went to college. With your student going to school, this is very different. One, again, going back to the cost structure, it didn't cost the equivalent of a house at that point when you went to school. The other side is, interestingly enough, seeing how the work world is put together, because we don't live in an economy anymore where just a bachelor's degree coming out of school will yield you a good job. It's really about taking the time to understand what are the career fields that are really out there, or let me rephrase that, having your student do so, not you. Seeing this for really what it is and what their interests lie, mapping those two things together, the career fields and the work world, your students' interests, pairing them together and getting them to see what this really looks like. Because here's the thing about education, and especially a collegiate education, it's a tool. It's an actual tool to get you to the next level. Yes, you do grow, you do learn a lot more about yourself and all of those things, but it's built to get you to a career path. That's what it's meant for. So let's stop ignoring that part. Let's start actually making sure that we're doing the career development work, which is what we do all day long here with our kids. 60-70% of our time is spent career developing with our students, just so that we can make good decisions to find the schools that academically do the career fields that they're looking into best, to best position them into getting jobs and the better jobs once they walk out of school. So mapping all of that out is a total stressor because most parents can kind of see the parts and pieces, but it's very difficult to put them all together. And then you have a student, or let me rephrase that, you have a kid who looks at you and says, I'm a teenager, you don't know what you're talking about. So can't tell you how often we get calls that are just like, Aaron, come talk to my kid. Because no matter what I say, it's going to be wrong. It's going to be the wrong answer. So sometimes the third party can really help that and really break that tension, break that ice down. In fact, we regularly sit down with our advisors and when before they're meeting with families and go over, there are three typical outcomes that are wanted for this college decision when we sit down with two parents and a student. One of them wants a great financial deal. One of them wants what's best for their kid, and one wants a good career path.
Yeah.
And so we have to be able to answer those three questions all at once. And it's very difficult for the three to just sit down and answer all of those for each other because, again, everybody wants something different. So here we are. We're arbiters of the deal when all three parts are just as equally important, and everybody's part in this is important. But it's very difficult to do that when it's just the three of you, but we can definitely help that.
Well, I can personally attest. We worked with you with our family too, and I think the big hurdle, and you did an excellent job with this, is to really the discovery of what does that student want to do. And we may have been lucky. Our daughter really did know what she wanted to do, but it's really refining that path. What does it mean? What is the definition of it? What is it really called? Where you have the other extremes, like, I don't know what I want to do. Or, we didn't have to go through that process of that total discovery of where your interests lie and such. So that made that stress point a lot easier of really defining what is that degree called, what universities to look for, what to look for in the website that is there or not there, quite frankly, that maybe saves you some time to going to that university for a stop going, wow, that was a total waste of time. Or, yeah, they've got some nuances there you might want to, and they're not really saying it out. You're right. It's a totally different world from a perspective of a parent of what's out there, how to investigate this.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, it's the same process even with a student that says, I absolutely know what I want to do versus one, I don't know what I want to do at all.
That's good to hear.
Interestingly enough is because of the fact of this, even for the students that know what they want to do, not most students, almost every student know this about the work world. Doctor, teacher, lawyer, my parents do X. Mm-hmm. That's their extent of knowledge of the work world. And it doesn't matter if you have a 2.4 student or a 4.2 student, or it doesn't matter because their exposure or what they've seen is just not there. So you can have incredibly brilliant kids, and we have valedictorians all the time who walk through the store, but they just haven't seen what the work world looks like. Right. So you can't replace that with knowledge. You still have to be able to understand what that looks like. So to your point, Brett, even with working with your family and your daughter, it's really been just a discovery of what does this path really look like. Right. She had an idea of what's going on here, but let's open up the floodgates. Let's see, to your point, what is this thing called out there?
Yeah.
How are universities adapting this particular degree set? Because they all do it in their own unique way. You'll find that even though one degree may be called, as an example, graphic design is not the same to everybody. Mm-hmm. And it varies tremendously between visual communication design, three-dimensional art, two-dimensional art, or even more marketing media-based and advertising, or even digital and more web-based. And it just really depends on the school. So that's where it gets really interesting, because a student may say, I really like this, and they end up in a program that doesn't do it the way they envisioned it, and now they think that they're not built for that degree set, when the truth is they're just not built for that SKU. So that's why we want to see what those look like now while they're sophomores, juniors, and seniors in high school, to help us pick this better. And these were all the things that kind of, as you roll them out, especially getting into the finances of how can we afford this, how do we do all of these pieces? No wonder this is so stressful for a parent, because, I mean, mercy, you're still being a parent. You still have to take care of all of your kids, and you still have to work, and you still have to do everything else. That's why we really think that what we do, to be honest with you, is going to be commonplace in 10 years. I mean, we've really started this now, and I think that everybody needs help now, because it's such a complex decision-making process. It affects everybody in the family with this, and it takes a lot of time to really work it out. I always say, I could figure out how to change my own oil, or actually more equated to this decision-making process, I could figure out how to swap out my own transmission. I could do it. Do I have the time, energy, tools, and wherewithal to do all of that?
Right. Yeah. And I think the industry, as you talked about too, has changed dramatically. Colleges, universities have changed to suit those and to be more specialized, possibly than just a general education, walking out with a 4-year degree. Yep. And you graduated from Ohio State, so you're guaranteed a job.
Yeah.
It's just not that way anymore.
Nope.
And again, it's that generational that anybody in their even 30s to 40s are going to realize that their kids have a totally different world they're walking into.
Absolutely, absolutely. We use the example of degrees all the time that used to, you could walk out of school and you were fine just so long as you had one. In fact, that's even why brand identity made sense for so long. That's why you're familiar with the names of Harvard, Dartmouth, Case Western, Ohio State, Penn State, because it was more about the pedigree 20, 30 years ago than the actual degree itself. We don't exist in that economy anymore. Now it's about the skill set. What do you bring into market?
What are the 2 to 3 tips on how to approach this time? Looking at a sophomore to junior year, junior to senior, just highlight tips of how to reduce the stress right out the chute,
Sure.
knowing of all the things they're going to walk into. And they're already hearing it at school from the guidance counselors and career counselors and such, depending on the school systems. But they're giving them the heads up. They're giving them the emails. They're saying, hey, come to this workshop, this workshop. We've got college visits going on. It's starting to bombard them now.
Yes, it is. You're starting to get a lot of information coming from left and right. And the only thing you know is for sure is that you got to get your kid into school.
Right.
You've got to do that.
What are a couple of things to just ease your mind? Know that it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But start the process.
Start the process. Here's tip number 1, and it is actually something not to do, because everyone will tell you have to go do or you feel obligated. Don't run out and just go do a college visit or a bunch of them. Don't do it, because you're taking off time from work. Your kid's taking off time from school. It's usually going to cost you a little bit because you may have to stay overnight, and you're just going to go visit that campus just to walk around and see it. Unless it's locally in your neighborhood and you can do it for an afternoon, that's not going to really cost you any time or money just to get a feel for a college campus. There's no reason to just go jump out into a bunch of campus visits and just go start visiting campuses if you don't know why you're visiting. And I can tell you, because the school looked great on paper, or because the mascot's cool, or my friends go here, or we went there, those are not really great decisions or reasons. And that's just more to save for your time than anything else. So don't feel obligated to run out and go do that. In fact, for our families, we don't even send them on visits until the back end of their junior year, after we've already reviewed 12 to 15 schools anyway, because we want them to have that list narrowed down to 7, 8 at the most, and you're visiting 6 to 7. So that's really not where you want to start. You don't want to begin with just jumping out into college visits. But I know folks are anxious. They want to get started in this. I'll tell you, the first thing you can actually do, freshman year, sophomore year especially, start talking to them about what you do. What your job is. How does it really exist? What does it really work like? We kind of take our jobs for granted because we've been doing them for as long as we have. And we think that their transparency is because we see it so often that our kids know that. Our kids don't. You'll be surprised. Your kids really don't know what you do all day. You may have explained it, but they don't really have a vision for it. Interestingly enough, take your kids to work for a couple of days. And if they have an interest in a particular career field, set up a shadowing opportunity. That's really what you want to do early, because then you can start to get their wheels turning down the path of really understanding what they want to do. And again, for those families that their student is saying, I really want to do this, challenge them on that, and not challenge them and say that, do you really want to do this? Give them exposure to it. Make sure that they can see what this actually is doing, because they may have a vision of it from a TV show, to be honest, or something along that lines, but they really don't know how the inner workings of that job may work. Because in the end, this becomes real easy if you can really hone down and do great career development work. Because here's how you craft an education. You talk to the source. If you want to be a forensic scientist for the police department, as an example, you're not going to do what you see on CSI. So you want the student to really go and actually see what's really happening here. And let's say that all works out and they really like it and all that. You know, the next step to craft that education, to see what that kid needs to go to school for, is ask the people that work in that department what they did. Where do they go to school? What degrees do they have? What skill sets do they want to see in recent college graduates? And bada bing, there we go. Now we've actually got a formula, because then we can go and just actually start sifting through and find schools that do those particular things well and take the recommendations there. Now we have a plan. Now we actually have a starting point that makes sense versus just kind of throwing things out there. So that's how you want to begin, interestingly enough. Freshman, sophomore year, take your kids to work. Take them to see somebody that is doing something that they want to do. Let them have a day off of school to go do that. That's the most important thing you do, because Mercy, you can get a lot of questions answered from that experience, and maybe even a couple more. That really is a good starting point. The second biggest piece is from the financial side. Saving is always a plus. We always say save as much as you can. I'm here to tell you, though, there is no reason on this good God green earth that you should be setting aside $250,000 or even $100,000 to me, to be honest, to send one kid to school. In my opinion, and what we work off of here, is you should be setting aside roughly an average starting salary for a college graduate of that year, and you should take that and splice it basically into 4 years. And that's how much you should be investing in education for your student. So really, in the end, we boil this down to, and when we do this here at College Liftoff, how much should the student be taking on in debt, and how much should the students or the family be paying out of pocket based off of the career path. So if we really work backwards from the career path, we know exactly how much the family should be spending. But let's say in 5 years, the average college graduate makes on average $42,000 a year, $44,000 a year, make that easy. So that way, if it's $44,000 a year, starting salary, you should pretty much have $44,000 set aside for that kid to go to school. Put about $11,000 toward it a year. Now, you may be looking at price tags and say, that's absolutely ludicrous. Price tags are $60,000, $70,000 a year. Well, I'm going to ask you this. Do you really expect to spend $60,000 or $70,000 a year to send your kid to school? Do you really expect to do that? Do you want to do that? Is that even feasible? Probably not. Don't worry, it's not feasible for any of us. Set aside that much, then you work your way into actually negotiating with schools and looking at the price tags and seeing how much scholarship money you can get. That's how you want to start with it. Set aside an average starting salary. That's where you want to begin with the finances. The third thing I would tell you is, honestly, call us. Because once you have those two things put together, then it's really pretty good. You're at a great starting point, because now we can start to see what the career development side looks like. You have the appropriate amount of money. Then we just find the schools that do it well. We actually study the financials heavily on the back end, from endowment structures to how much the school actually have and how much they're actually giving per student. And then we negotiate with the schools anyway with you to make sure we can lower on the budget. And that's how you want to get to this.
Thanks for talking with us.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks again for listening to this week's Today's Health and Wellness podcast, brought to you by Central Ohio Health and Wellness Magazine and Today's Health. If you have a health and wellness segment you would like us to cover, send us an email. Our contact information is in the show notes.
And if you'd like more information about sponsoring our podcast, like Ashley just mentioned, our contact information is in the podcast notes. We look forward to hearing from you.
Circle270media.com.